I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. And I want to talk about Rosalía, because if you don't know her work, it's time. It's time to talk about this. Rosalía is one of the most successful artists to come out of Spain. About a decade ago, she became known for taking flamenco music and then blending it with everything. Blending it with pop, blending it with hip-hop, blending it with R&B. And then since then, she's built this reputation for being someone who says, genre, who needs it? You know, is just so playful around with the idea of genre. And now Rosalía wants to define what it means to be a global pop star. Have a listen to her newest single. That's Berghain, a collaboration between Rosalía, Bjork, and Yves Tumor. It's off Rosalía's upcoming album, Lux. Reanna Cruz has heard the album, which is a flex, to be honest with you. Reanna Cruz, how are you, pal? Nice to see you.
Good. I'm doing good, Elamin.
Okay, you were at a listening party for this album, because it hasn't come out yet, but you're like, no, I am one of the chosen ones. Tell me about the listening party. How was it?
It was great. I really and truly believe that this is Rosalia's magnum opus, and I don't say that lightly.
She's had several, you know? Yes.
Some would say,
yeah.
You know, I think everything that this woman touches turns to gold in a way. But this record is on another level, both in scope and in sound. She's things on this album that I have not heard in pop music in a very long time, at least.
I was excited for this album, but then hearing you say that, saying like, look, the risk that she takes on this record, that's the stuff that people have been writing about and talking about. She sings in 13 different languages on this album. She performs alongside the London Symphony Orchestra. It also kind of functions as a storybook. There's a beginning, middle, and end kind of arc to it. Tell me about Rosalía's approach to making this album here.
Yeah, so in interviews in the lead up to the release, she's talked about this album, A, being an opera, and B, having 4 distinct movements to it within that larger context of the opera. And that kind of allows her to play with song form. It allows her to play with the way that a record is constructed and the way that we consume an album. There were instructions when we were listening to the record that were like, ideally, the artist wants you to consume this in a dark room with the lyrics pulled up, reading the lyrics as you're listening.
Let's go.
And that really feels like, you know, dark room aside, like having the lyrics pulled up really feels like the only way to consume this record because it's so lyrically dense. And she does famously, as we've discussed and as everybody discussed, she sings in 13 languages.
Yeah.
And she's talked about working with a phonetic coach, trying to make sure that she has all of the pronunciations correct. There's full songs on here in different languages. I recall Ukrainian being used. I recall Japanese. She sings in Hebrew. She sings in Arabic. It's pretty. I don't know. It was a fascinating listen, you know, following the lyrics along and seeing what she's decided to put on tape.
It's a great experience talking to you about this and watching your face as you sort of try to sum up the scope of the thing that she tried to do with this record. Because I think, like, when I think about pop music, I think about, you know, like a pretty good hook, some cheeky lyrics, and something I'm going to maybe remember. Everything about what you're telling me tells me that this album sounds nothing like that. Does it still sort of feel like it's within the sort of pop landscape? Is it still sort of trying to have a conversation about pop?
That's a good question. And as we're having this conversation, I am still trying to form my thoughts on this record because it really is such a massive piece of media. But some of the songs on here are poppy, but in the same way that like Bjork or FK Twigs is poppy.
Yes.
Like there's a thing here of electronic sounds with organic symphonic orchestras that evoke something like Bjork's Homogenic, right? That's the last time I heard something of this scale and of this caliber.
Which is like, that's a high compliment. That's a high bar too, you know?
Absolutely. And that was Bjork's record where she went to Iceland and, you know, did the same thing, got an orchestra, recorded these massive songs that fuse pop and classical together. Bjork did that. Rosalía is doing that with a feature from Bjork, so it feels kind of passing the torch. But all that being said, I have not heard anything like this before. The closest conduits I have are Bjork. She's mentioned Kate Bush before.
Yeah.
FKA Twigs, Magdalene. Like these are things of that caliber.
The audacity and the ambition to get in the studio and say, I'm going to make something that's Bjorkish, that's Kate Bush-like, is just on its own tells me that like you know, like you're aiming for the artists who like we define ourselves by. And so what I want to do is I want to return to this idea of Rosalía as someone who's defining or redefining global pop stardom, singing in 13 different languages. She recently appeared on the New York Times podcast. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
My sister, she says, then I don't know if I agree. I disagree, I think, but she says that my music is not pop, but she says that I am. I disagree.
Why?
Because I want to think that my music is pop. There has to exist another way of making pop. Björk proved it. Kate Bush proved it. Yeah. I need to think that what I'm doing is pop.
That's another declaration of ambition, right? That's to say there's a narrowing of how we understand and define pop music. And then there are these people who, you know, some people consider them to be on the margins of pop music, but she's trying to say, no, there must be space for people who are doing something of this scale and this ambition in the world of pop. What do you make of what she's saying there?
I think she's onto something. Mm-hmm. I think pop music, to me, pop music doesn't have to sound like pop, and I put that capital P in quotes.
Doesn't have to sound like Sabrina Carpenter, you know?
Well,
yes.
We don't need like synthesizers. We don't need these massive saw sounds to sound like it has gravity to it. I think pop music is inherently compelling, and I think it has meticulous artistry behind it. It's not slapdash put together, and I think the amount of thought that Rosalía has put into this record demonstrates that fundamentally it is pop. She is constructing these songs on a high musical level.
Mm-hmm. I think like when I think about the desire to sort of be this playful, she's also someone who is classically trained, right? Like she's someone who has that kind of grounding. And she's trying to say, you know what, if we can combine opera and symphonic sounds into something like this, it's not inorganic to her. It's something that she's already kind of like relatively trained in. Do you think the fact that it's so easy for her to play in that mode, does that make it for you closer to something that is pop? Like it's not a put on, you know? Like sometimes artists will go, I'm making a symphonic album. She's like, no, I just speak this language, you know?
Yeah, I think fundamentally she's comfortable in this lane, and I think that's going a long way. You know, people have their issues with Motomami. I have my issues with her last record, Motomami. But part of what those issues are is that she didn't feel comfortable. It felt like she was stepping into something that she didn't necessarily want to go fully in. It felt a little like cosplay to me. This record feels authentic to her. She has the training for it. And not to say that she should only do stuff that she has classical training to do, but this album proves that she is very, very talented in this lane of classical pop and fusing those two worlds.
Reanna, it's early November. It's a time that I start to sit down and make my best of, you know, music of the year. How do you think this record is going to be received? Should I wait for this album before I keep making my list, or what?
I think you got to wait a few days. You know, I think like this is the type of album that you hear it and you stop dead in your tracks. You know, there's tracks on this record that I think are some of the best pop songs of the year. I think she's doing things narratively on this record that I haven't heard this entire year, frankly. And I think this will be one of those albums that people talk about for a while.
My end of year list will have to wait a few more days until this record comes out. Reanna Cruz, you're the best. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, friend.
Thanks, Elamin.
Of course. Reanna Cruz is a freelance writer in Los Angeles. Rosalía's new album, Lux, from Columbia Records, drops this Friday on all streaming platforms or wherever you get your music. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Come back tomorrow. We're talking about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I can't wait for that conversation. In the meantime, have a great day.